Heyo, fourth grade. Welcome back for another rousing week in reading language arts with your boy, Mr. Remedies. We are continuing to talk about biographies. We are right in the thick of things when it comes to the biography genre. Today, our mini lesson is all about how biographers usually include people who influence their subject. You know what's next. We got to know where we're headed for this lesson, what's gonna our end game is. So let's head on over to our learning goals and success criteria. Today we are learning to understand and infer the influence of a subject's relationships in a biography, and that sounds like a very complicated sentence, but I know that that's where we're headed. I know that you guys are capable of achieving that goal, and there are some ways that you can check yourself along the way to see you're on the right track. Okay, they're called success criteria. You know that, I know that, we love that. So they are as follows. We're trying to say to ourselves, I can define infer, which is a review word, but it's always a good idea to review. I can define influence, and I can determine the kind of relationship two people have in a biography. Okay, if you can hit those goals along the way, those little signposts along the way, boom, you'll be the newly elected mayor of Success Town. All right, let's move on to definitions, and then we'll really kind of dive into the meat of the lesson. We are really looking at two important words today as far as our definitions go. The first one we've seen before, and that's the word infer. Infer means to know something without being told directly, using evidence. So, like, you can infer that someone is sad by looking at the frown on their face, right? Okay, infer, big skill for a reading. And our second really important word today is the word influence. Influence has two definitions. It can be used as a verb or a noun. The first definition you see right there on your screen is the ability to affect a person. Okay, this is the verb form. And so we're going to look at an example sentence. The Beatles influenced many modern rock bands. Okay, so they affected those people. Okay, the second definition is the noun form. An influence can also be a person or thing that affects a person. Okay, so a little bit of a personal touch here. You can say that Mrs. Waits had a positive influence in his life. Okay, so that is a thing or a person in this case that had a good effect on, in this case, my life. Big shout out to Ms. Waits if she's somehow watching. All right. So those are our two vocabulary words today. We want to keep them in mind, especially influence, because that is really what we want to focus on today. Okay. Now that we have that out of the way, let's head on over to an example. Okay. As we think about this first example, I want to ask you guys, how do people accomplish great things? Right? Think about all of the famous people you may have read about, and how do they accomplish the great things that they have? The answer might surprise you, but the answer is that they are influenced by others. They are influenced to do those great things. Right? And so our first example comes from The Radiant Child, the story of young artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. I hope I said that correctly. And we're looking at text from pages 7 through 12. And that text says, his art comes from his mother, Mathilde, a Puerto Rican woman who designs and sews, cooks and cleans, and makes the house look like a stylish magazine. But most important, she lies on the floor and draws with Jean-Michel on his father's old work papers. From her, he learns that art is not only in the poetry books she reads to him or in the theaters and museums they visit. Art is the street games of little children, in our style and the words that we speak. It is how the messy patchwork of the city creates new meaning for ordinary things. While visiting the museum, they look at his favorite works of art, reading the story behind each artist, reading the story behind each work. This is how Jean-Michel learns that what it means to be a famous artist. Let's look closer at the text, and let's really rip it apart, okay? So I want you guys to really look and ask yourselves, what do we learn about Jean-Michel from this selected passage, okay? I bet you're putting your big old brains to use out there across Copper's Cove. I'm sure someone at House Creek or maybe even Martin Walker noticed something right here towards the beginning of our passage. Boom, right there. That his mama is artistic. She makes the house look like a stylish magazine. Okay? I bet there's some other kiddos all across Copper's Cove, like maybe some out at Williams Ledger or Clemens Parsons, that noticed here in our second paragraph that his mama taught him about finding art in unique places, about really opening up his creativity. Okay? I know all those cool kids at Fairview, Miss Jewel, and especially the ones at Halstead. They probably noticed this in the last paragraph right here about the museums. Yeah, you betcha. His mama took him to museums. Apologize about the extra tea. I must have been really excited about that word "took" today. But we see here that that she took the time to draw with him. That really opened his eyes, and that she quite literally took him to museums. And we see that he enjoyed it. He read the stories about the artist and the works. Okay? So now my question becomes a little bit more up to us and seeing how we interpret that. Right? So my question is, why did Javaka Steptoe include this information? Why all the talk about his mama? I bet the author wants to show the reader that Pasquale was encouraged by others. Seems pretty good thought. Did you guys have the same thought? Oh, hold on a second. I got another thought coming. Boom, right there in my brain piece. I think maybe, just maybe, the author wants to show us where his love of art came from, too. Oh, that's pretty good. I bet if you had some similar thoughts, boom, you are a biography all-star right there. So let's move on to another example. Now, for this example, I have a slightly different question I want to ask you guys. And that question is, where does influence come from? Okay? In our first example, we saw where influence came from a parent, a family member, but is that always the case? Right? For this example, we're looking at Mary Cassatt, and we're going to look at selected text from a couple of different pages, namely page 10, 15 through 16, and page 26, where those passages combined say that Mary pressed her nose against a gallery window, absorbing pastel drawings by Edgar Degas. A riot of color, she smiled and later said, "I saw art then as I wanted to see it." And on pages 15 and 16, we're told that the great Degas rapped on Mary's studio door. Rapped means to knock. "Join our band of independents," he proposed. "We paint as we please. We break the judge's rules." Mary beamed, meaning she smiled and was very happy. "I began to live," she said. And then on page 26, we are told that Mary produced a multitude of prints, etchings, monotypes, working with Degas on her own. For Mary, art was life, life was art. And there the word multitude means many. It's a big word, means many. Okay? So again, where does influence come from? To answer this, let's look and let's dive in. Let's dive in and tear this one apart too. Okay? So we have our passage. What did we learn about Mary Cassatt's influences from this passage? Okay? Boom. Right at the beginning, we see that she was influenced by someone she did not know personally. On page 10, she does not know Degas yet. She knows him as an artist, but she is just influenced by him because of the art that he does. Right? We see later that Degas and Mary Cassatt did begin to know each other and were familiar with each other. They were called contemporaries, which means they had a similar job at the similar time. And Degas thought highly of Cassatt and wanted her to join the group of artists. Right? That seems pretty cool. I think it'd be pretty cool. Someone want me to join their group. Let's go back over here. Degas created art that inspired her. Back on page 10, we know that art inspired her to further her artistic career. And at the end of our passage, we're told that Degas and Gassat worked together creating art. Now think to yourself, when you are on a team, whether it be in PE or a small group in your classrooms, were you influenced by the people you worked with? Good question to chew on. Right? So let me put my thinking cap on again. And I want to say that I want to ask, why did Barbara Herkert include this information? And you know what? I bet you guys have some good ideas. So, bing! Thought number one, she wanted to show that we are influenced from many different people, not just family. Okay? Degas and Mary Cassatt were not related at all. Nope, didn't happen. They weren't related. Okay? So the influence came in her life from a different place than Besquois. Okay? I think also, bing, over here, that maybe she wanted to show how artists inspire each other, which is a common thing. So there's a couple of different reasons, and I had to infer this because the author did not tell me why she included this information. Okay, and if you're out there practicing the same skills, coming up with the similar ideas as Mr. Remedies, boom, you are really just knocking this lesson out of the park, and I'm so proud of you out there. Yep. Now, let's kind of organize our thoughts, though, because we've talked about two different examples, and let's see how they kind of compare to each other. Shall we? We shall. We got us here a handy-dandy little chart. Pretty proud of myself here. We see that we can use this chart to compare the influences of the two examples and the two people we've read about. So in Jean-Michel Basquiat, we see that the person who influenced the subject the most was his mother. And how that was done, how was the subject influenced, was that his mother was artistic. She took him to museums to learn about art and artists. In Mary Cassatt's case, though, it wasn't a family member. It was a famous painter, Edgar Degas. And he influenced her by inviting her to join a group of painters that painted the way they wanted to. And she liked the way they painted. And that kind of created a lifelong friendship or collaboration, which means to work together. All right, let's move on to the all-important review. Boom, let's put a bow on this. Let's wrap this up. All right, so as a review, biographies usually include people that influence the subject, okay? Because those are really important people in their lives. Influence means to affect someone, and people are influenced in a variety of ways from a variety of sources. Authors think it is important to show these facts, okay? All right, that's a quick lesson on influences. You know that you are influenced by tons of people out there. Famous people are just like you. They've been influenced by the people in their lives, whether it be a family member or a famous painter that inspired them, or any number of sources, okay? And I want you to keep that in mind as you read our biographies throughout the week, all right? As always, I'm not going to change. I'm Mr. Remedies. You're not going to change. You're always awesome. And we will see you next time.